Good morning, everybody. We're going to be taking a look at Unit 1 here in UX Design. And we're going to be basing our discussions off of the first several chapters of our textbook. Now, I'm realizing that as I walk away from this microphone, it's probably not picking up my voice, so I'm going to have to try to keep myself here. All right, so we're going to be looking at the first few chapters of our book and some of the important concepts that I've highlighted in this PowerPoint. If you want to open up the PowerPoint and take notes, that's on you. I will have this video if you want to refer back to it. Remember, you're not being tested on any of this material, but it is very informative, and I think you'll find it useful in the stuff that you're doing with this course. All right, first thing I do want to point out is that there is a website that goes with this book. It's printed, I think, in the introduction section somewhere. And if you do go to it, which I encourage you to do, you'll notice that there are some things here available to you if you're so interested. There's some resources on a bunch of different things, and I'll let you read those. They do correspond to the readings. There's also some downloads, including some proposal templates, persona building documents, etc. There's also some stuff right down here at the bottom that we are going to talk about towards the tail end of this presentation, and that is how do you conduct meetings? And you guys probably haven't even thought about that too much. But there's formal ways to do it and informal ways to do it. So some documents there that might help you in that capacity. All right, just wanted to point that out so you're aware that it exists. You should always look for those kind of resources, especially with textbooks, because sometimes textbooks have very, very rich feature sets online. That is the case with your Java 2 book if you haven't been introduced to that. There's a very rich feature set with that book, so you want to explore it. All right, let's talk about what UX design is. And you may or may not have heard, this terminology before. I'm hoping that you have. But notice that it's UX. And what does the X stand for? Yeah, experience. User experience design. It's different than user interface design, although they are very closely related. Now you guys are learning about, how to put together websites and applications, and part of that work is creating an interface that people can look at, click on, navigate through, read, whatever. And that's an important aspect of it, absolutely. But getting a button up on the screen that somebody can click on isn't quite the same as making it the right button, right? Or making that button findable, even. You guys have heard me complain. Let me give you an example of some bad interface design. So one of the things I often do for you guys is sometimes you want to have little meetings, right? And I go in and I sign out a room for you, and chances are if you've asked me recently, you've probably heard me grumble about how bad the interface is on this website. So I go to this link here, and I sign in. Hopefully my password is stored. All right, and I mean, really visually, I look at this and go, that looks pretty nice. There's a nice menu bar at the top, and there's some stuff on the left, and everything is clean. There's nothing really complicated about this, and I want to find a meeting space for you, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll click here, create a reservation. All right, create a reservation. Create a reservation. Okay, what's happening? All right, well, there's some buttons over here that say book now and about, but don't I need to have something to book first? Okay. All right, I don't have any events, I know that. All right, let's look at locations. Let's see what I can figure out here.
But usually people they want to go there, right?
Yeah, you would think, right? All right, so here's some locations, and really what this turns out to be, if you start looking through this list, is all the locations at all the campuses that are available for sign out.
Okay, great. Want to sign me up on this?
All right, I'm going to sign you up for 106A. Well, now what happened? All right, that doesn't... So do you see the conundrum here? Do you want to know how you actually have to do this? Watch.
Do you just look at time?
I have to click book now. Do you know how long that took me to figure out? I consider myself pretty computer savvy. A little bit, considering my job role. All right, so I finally figured out where I can go. All right, and there's a process to going through it. You want to see even more of a problem? Yeah, not right now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click the little calendar icon to change the date. You guys see what I'm doing here? No matter how many times I click, it doesn't work. Nope. Doesn't work in Chrome. Doesn't work in Chrome. It just so happens that Gateway is very Google-centric, right? We do our email, our Google Drive, all that calendaring. So what browser do you think most people are using? Right. So how many support tickets do you think that they've had before somebody figures out this doesn't work? Old system worked fine on Chrome. It wasn't as pretty. The CSS wasn't as clean, but it worked.
But this isn't a gateway.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's handled by, it's just a piece of software.
Okay.
It's a piece of software that sits on top of the same database. It's the same, it's all the same information, they just change the interface. So you guys see where I'm leading you with this? Just because it looks good doesn't mean it works. Doesn't mean that I'm not going around clicking on all the wrong things. So what happens to the user experience here? So you see the difference between interface design and experience? Not a happy camper. So I know now to go to Firefox, or Internet Explorer, believe it or not, works too. All right, so I'm going to put something up on the screen here in just a second that's going to kind of hopefully get your mind working in this capacity. Now, interestingly, one of the misconceptions that we have as IT people, right, people that are learning how to develop, and more importantly, we're web designers, and a lot of people in the development world think we're just front-end people. And in some capacities, we can be. That's certainly a big aspect of it. So we just think about how it looks on the screen, right? But you know, like user experience design extends far beyond that. It really does. And it's not a field that's solely isolated to IT. Our focus in this class is doing it to create websites, right? So we know how to deal with stuff like this. But there's other more interesting things that we can look at. So I'm going to find you an example. That's not a good example.
It really works a lot.
And here is an example. You walk into an elevator, step in, and you go, all right, I need to go to whatever floor. Why are you troubling this? Very sincerely, what's laugh-worthy about this? How? You just pick your number and press the button, right?
Yeah, it's like going up. And then you get
Yeah, you guys are catching all the right stuff here, right? Okay, so which one is the button? The white one is the button.
Oh, okay.
Can I see it?
See, this is a great, I love this picture. I'm glad I found it again. For some reason, it's way down in the Google search results now. But I like this because it's not very sharp, right? It's a little blurry. You know, and sometimes, you know, you walk into an elevator and depending on how many cups of coffee you've had or whatever, it might look a little blurry to you. If your glasses are dirty, or sunglasses on, or you're in a hurry, you just kind of glance at it. So who's to say that I go to press that number 17 and I don't accidentally press the 16 next to it? Because for whatever reason, I'm kind of thinking that this might be the button. Why? Because it's round and it looks like a button and it's got 17 on it. Or if you're a person that's blind and you're actually reading the Braille. Yeah, okay, so then where is the... Right.
Right, because usually things go top, down.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? So somewhere somebody built this elevator and they put the buttons on there, and then they got smart and they actually put the number inside the button. You would think that would be enough, right? But we do have people that can't see. And they need, and it's like a law that you have to have like Braille in the elevator so you can feel around and figure out where you're going. But this is an example of user experience design as well. I mean, there's an interface, but you're also trying to get somebody somewhere, and there's a reaction to the interface. There's an intuitiveness or lack thereof. I would wager that there's a fair number of people that accidentally press the wrong button on this elevator. Probably a higher percentage than some of the other ones that I was looking at. Let me bring my Google search results over, and I searched through quite a number of them. And it's kind of interesting to kind of look at the different techniques that are being employed, right? So here you have one that just is the buttons. This is a good one too. What's weird about this one? Has a -1. And better yet, a 0. I mean,
How did you know?
or does it mean go down a floor?
No, -1 would be
You know,
the
down one.
worst.
Wait,
Whatever.
I pressed 7. I meant 6.
I would
That's
think
interesting,
-1
though.
would be the basic.
So, like, if you're thinking about this, you know, in sort of the capacity that somebody walks in, we assume everybody's Einstein when they walk into the elevator to can figure out where they're going, right? But I'm going to tell you what, even the brightest person might walk in and go, So you think that, like, if -1 is the parking garage? Yeah, there you go. But this is a good example, too. But I think that if you start looking at ones that are actually better laid out, here's an example. I think this is a little better. Yeah.
That's right, standard for the buttons to the right. They bring out a standard.
Yeah, buttons to the right seems to be some sort of a standard, as kind of indicated here, absolutely. You got keys that just have symbolism, right? You have ones that are just round. All right, are you guys noticing also the pattern that the buttons are round? Why?
That's how they started.
The original button must have been round, whoever made that first one. Because the button, you know, is kind of a mechanical / electrical thing, right? And you press that button, and it does something, and chances are it was like sitting on top of a post, and the post was probably round. And just so happens that, you know, when we put our finger on something and touch it, like if I put some ink on my finger and touched it to the board, chances are it would make a round impression. So round is a logical shape. right? The home button on an iPhone.
Well, maybe that's changing too.
Yeah, who knows these days with all that Apple stuff they're doing.
When grades, you can't use it anymore, so you just use a point on your phone.
Yeah, that's what happened then.
So, I mean,
Middle left. All right, yeah, there's a different one. This tries to break the confusion, apparently. And it looks like you can press on either side.
no, just left. It's got Braille on the button.
Yeah, we really don't know which part is
Yeah, it looks
pressable, right? Yeah, I think you
can
can.
push both.
Who's to know?
Well, I wouldn't be able to.
Visually, you wouldn't know. But let's say that only the right side is pushable, but you walk in and you're pressing on that left side.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Right? How long does it take you? Like half a second before you're pressing the other side? You know, and if, right. All right. But it's interesting, I think, and I think that if you look at a lot of these, here's some square examples, you are going to see some commonalities for sure. Here, let's take a look at another example. Marty, here's a back in my day story, right? It was kind of a revolutionary thing, right? Man learned how to brew beer. Did you guys ever see that Netflix documentary on how basically beer was responsible for making the world what it is today, right? Because the reason we raised grain was so that we could brew beer, and grain also happened to just coalesce society and all that kind of stuff. So beer is responsible for everything we have, right? That's the beer drinker's philosophy. All right, but there was a time when people would brew beer, and pretty much you had to like drink it right away. Such a problem to have, right? Because you really didn't have good storage for it. And what they would do is they would brew it up and put it in kegs, right? And then just pour it off and drink it. Eventually somebody got smart and was like, it would be really great if we bottled this stuff, right? So they did. They used technology they had, probably had a bottle, and probably started out with corks or those little flip lever tops like they have in the Grolsch bottles. Very clever little devices. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Like Mason, some Mason jars have that. Like seals and pull it down. Yeah, like milk.
If I can even spell this, Grolsch bottles.
Did you ever have one of those? Like the old milk bottle? Like
Yeah, see, like these little flip lever caps, right? Just to hold it in because, you know, beer's under pressure, right? I mean, you can cork it with regular cork. And then somebody came up with a bottle cap, a little piece of metal, and it crimps over the top. So you guys are familiar with those. You know, but bottles are expensive, and back then people used to do returns on bottles and used to get credit. You know, still think that beer tastes best out of a bottle, you know, probably. A matter of opinion. But somebody came up with the idea that, well, we could also can the beer. Right? All right. Do you know how they used to can beers? We actually used to have to open our beer like that with a can opener. And not only that, but take a look at this can of beer. That looks like you're opening up a can of vegetables, right? You're not going to like take the turn knob, you know, can opener and cut off the whole top and then cut your mouth on it, right? So they came up with those bottle openers. You guys always wonder what the pointy side was for. That's what it was for poking holes in cans. And of course, you didn't just make one hole in the can, you had to make two, right? One was a vent, because otherwise you get that suction effect, and that's no good either. And it kind of went through actually an evolution. This is kind of the evolution. So we were putting our beer in cans, we'd have to poke two holes in it.
also meant you have to carry a piece of equipment with you to do it, right? You wonder why people used to carry pocket knives all the time? One of the handiest things you can carry, honestly. You just can't do it in school. But just to be able to open up a can of beer or manipulate something if you have to, basically. But then it's like, somebody's like, well, you know, that's not very practical. Maybe we could come up with a way that they don't have to carry something in order to open the can. So they came up with that second approach, and frankly, I've never used one of those. No, and you can see it was pretty short-lived. But boy, this one lasted a while.
I cut my foot on many of those tabs.
Yep. Yeah. Do you hear that? That's exactly right.
Beaches, maybe walk in the sand, could be something else laying around.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Exactly, my dad complained about playing like going out there, it's kind of shit up and so forth.
But I'll tell you what, it was clever, right?
And compared to
You didn't need a tool. The opening was long enough that you could put your mouth over part of it and it still would vent, right? So you could drink as fast as possible as one of the objectives. Right, but then you had the refuse. Now, when I was younger, we had a clever scheme for the refuse. We formed it into a chain so we could keep track of how many beers we had. But as Marty said, they were problematic because there was litter everywhere, because it wasn't just beer that was doing it. It was soda, right? And then you'd be on the beach, like he was saying. It was just a problem, you know. So then they came up eventually with this design, which is the one they still use today, where the opener stays in place. There's still enough room to vent. Some people still hate those things in the way and like wiggle them off and break them and throw them away, you know, because they just don't like it. All right, but there's a really good example of how it evolved over time.
Kidney dialysis because they're a higher grade aluminum.
Ah,
A lot of people say,
great.
Have you been detecting sometimes? That's all you find is a compound. So
Yeah.
it's still out there.
Yeah, they are still out there. Oh, I got good stories about pop tops. All right, so just gives you an idea of an evolution of how we interface with an object, and this is user experience design too. There's thought that goes into it. Somebody just doesn't go, okay, this is what we're doing, this is why. Well, there is a why, right? And it evolves for a reason. All right, you might say that, why even bother with cans, right? That's really on you. They do travel better. I think there's more fizz in a can than a bottle.
You get warmer faster.
All right. As we were talking about here, so what is UX design? We already did both the physical. All right, so some things that we think about, don't think about. We don't really conceive of
Tangible items or electronics people as to how they function and how people use them. But every single day you work with stuff, tangible physical items, and you probably don't think at all about how they function unless they're inconvenient, right? Or if they're super convenient. I'll give you a great example. My wife, she's very much into like natural foods and holistic
kind of stuff, and she doesn't want me using like off-the-shelf toothpaste, right? Because if you look at the ingredients, I mean, not the least of which most of them have sugar in them, right? You're brushing your teeth to make your teeth healthy, but then you're putting sugar right back on them to do it. It makes no sense. So she buys all these products that are natural and good for you and don't have all this junk in it.
But you know what? They don't have really good packaging design. And it's like,
Have to like screw the cap off the toothpaste? This is like circa like 1960. What the heck? That's my attitude, right? I like the Aquafresh where you just click it open and squeeze and you're all set to go. Not only that, but it's got this, toothpaste container. I can set it upright. So if I want to use it in the shower or the bathroom, or it fits in my vanity, real nice.
It's a little container and put your other stuff in it.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to go through that trouble. But you deal with this stuff all the time. Now you got to start taking that same sort of critical approach and applying it to your technology design. You got to sit down at the websites that you're making, and you need to start looking at how those things are put together and what kind of satisfaction or dissatisfaction you feel from it.
Isn't that like the same thing as how they're modernizing things now, like we were talking about with our page and like,
Yeah.
it's easy to use.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't like using a command line. Who can remember all those commands? Sounds like somebody's getting hurt next door. All right, so there are people who do this for a living. We just look at stuff and go, that works. That doesn't work. Let's test it. Let's see what people think. That's all they do. All right, but notice the parts I have highlighted there. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to create something that makes sense, right? It makes sense if you're holding a toothbrush and you have toothpaste on the other hand, that you can just put your thumb on it and flip the top over and then have to set the toothbrush down, screw up the top, that whole process, right? Because when you're in a hurry in the morning, a couple of seconds makes a difference. Because that's a couple of seconds where somebody cut you off and you got onto the freeway, you didn't have to wait, you're there 5 minutes early. It sounds silly, but that's the thinking that goes into this stuff. But notice the bottom red highlight. People use a website, there's an emotional reaction to it, whether it's intended or not. You saw my reaction to that bad room reservation site. I mean, you spend like 10 minutes and you think you're pretty savvy with technology, then you figure out this tiny little button is the one you need. And then after you figure it out, then all of a sudden you're realizing it doesn't work in your browser. I mean, what kind of an emotional reaction does that strike in people? Do you think people want to go back to that website?
Angry face.
Right? This is real important considerations. All right. Okay, chapter 2. All right, the project ecosystem. Remember we were talking about company culture? There's quite a bit of that happens in certain environments. So if you're working on building websites, you might work on building websites individually as a freelancer. You might work with a small team of people. You might work for a professional design firm. And you might, in those types of circumstances, be much more likely to end up in a scenario where the user experience design is separated as a different component from the development side of things. That's not unusual. All right, some questions I threw up there. Some of this comes from the book, some of it is my interjection. All right, none of you are in the situation here where you're starting a new project, because I'm making the decision that you're going to just work on the ones that you're working on. So you're going to fall into that second bullet. But being in the stream of the process, and you guys are already on teams, there's some considerations you probably want to think about in terms of, do we like how we're working together as a team? Are we using the best technology? Do I like the people I'm working with? And I'm hoping, there's positive answers for those things. But I can just tell you from experience that there can be a lot of negativity and problems when you're working within a certain situation. We ran into some of those with our previous cohort. Sometimes getting pretty nasty. That happens in the workplace too. You get people just don't get along. So what do you think the productivity is on that? I'm sorry?
Do you think it's like a
I think sometimes people just don't get along.
Yeah. I used to have.
I mean, they can very clearly communicate that they don't like you.
Yeah.
Like even in the restaurant industry, you could have like a server that just wasn't right for the table, and you'd be like, okay, like you just don't match. Like
Right. You get people that are very serious.
Your customers are good, but you don't.
Yeah.
Like they don't. Like, it's not a good match.
That's kind of the culture part of it, but that happens in the workplace. And you get people that just don't get along for whatever reason. This time of year, this time every 4 years, we get people who start to voice their political opinions, right? Otherwise, people get along great, and then it's like, oh, you're into Trump? You're into Hillary? Oh, I hate you, right? What kind of idiot would like that person? Right? I mean, it's the truth of it.
I got some good advice when I moved to Texas, and my dad told me to stay away from their religious beliefs and their political beliefs.
Oh, right on.
That kept me pretty safe there.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe approach in business all the way around, honestly. All right. All right, so you're working with different kinds of people, and you need to figure out the dynamics of what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you right now, from what I see here, you guys don't have the kind of issues that I was just thinking about with one of the groups last time. I mean, you get people who don't, pull their share of the weight, right? That happens. Sometimes it's for a legitimate reason. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's for a technological reason. They just don't get how to do it. All right, that's different. But there's all these things that you've got to think about, and you still have to function as a team, because ultimately your project is evaluated as a team. And if somebody's paying you to do the work and you got a contract, you got to do the work. That's all there is to it. Okay, so what kind of site are you building? All right, well, you guys know what you're doing, right? You have that already firmly in mind. You guys are working on small teams, but you might work in a larger organization where you have people that do things aside from code and interface design and social media and server-side stuff. You might also have people that come in that are part of marketing or management or, who knows what departments they have, but they'll all have some sort of a stake in it. And chances are in larger ecosystems, as they call them, you're also going to have to start doing a little bit of investigating to see what kind of people are using your site or your application or whatever you're building, and how do you get to know who those people are? You research it, right? I wonder if the people that do the room scheduling software are hearing feedback of, and they probably did through the ticketing system. And they just kind of figured out, well, after a while, people will figure out they have to use Firefox, rather than just put a little message on the site that says, this best works with Firefox, or, All right, 4 different types of sites, and I'm going to go through some of this in a fairly rapid fashion here, because I do plan on finishing this before lunch. But they pretty much break down types of website designs into these 4 types of categories in terms of the type of projects that you're going to be working on, right? The first one says brand presence. You got marketing campaigns, content source. You think about what all these mean, and something that's based on a task of some sort. So, brand presence. Here's a great thought. Somebody go to think of a big product. Pepsi, something like that. Go to Pepsi.com, what comes up on their site? Think they have a shopping cart?
Logos first.
Are you downloading a PDF all about how it's done?
No, I literally typed in Pepsi.com.
Yeah, and what are you getting back?
A bunch of graphics, advertisements.
Right. brand presence.
hamburger thing in the corner.
So basically what they're showing you is this is our product, buy it. Right, this is brand presence. Now, chances are they probably have a corporate website where you can get all the information you need. You might even be able to link to it off of the site they have there.
For Pepsi Cola Frito-Lay.
I see it connect
Don't they keep the corporate supplies more separate than the marketing stuff? Like, I see
Yeah, typically.
LinkedIn stuff if you have to, or you have to look up their headquarters.
Yeah, well,
Why are you
absolutely.
calling the headquarters?
We don't want, hi, could I talk to the CEO, please?
Usually websites are for engagement of your customers.
Yeah, the type of website that you're looking for, basically the goals are these, is to basically get people visually interested in a product. Basically the same thing you're doing in a television commercial, right? You're getting to know the product, you know that they're trying to push something, and they always have target audiences. Remember that little thing that I put in there that was highlighted in red, the emotional connection part of things? You guys watch ads on the Super Bowl? During the Super Bowl, everybody, is into that?
Monkey baby, whatever that thing was so funny. That
Puppy
was
monkey
all-
baby?
Yeah, it was so funny.
So what's the point of that?
Just,
What product was that?
honestly, I don't know. It was probably the big something because they would have to pay so much money for that. Was it
Yeah,
like
it's a-
Pepsi or Coke or something?
Do you guys see a correlation though between like effective commercial types? Like what kind of commercials usually do well? Get a lot of
Lots of money.
beer. I'm thinking more like ones that make you laugh,
Yeah. Is that what?
or every once in a while they make a commercial about one that like pulls on your heartstrings, right? You're like, oh, I can't think of one offhand, but there's a reason they do that, right? Same type of thing is pushed on websites. All right, you could also do something like this where you're looking to basically promote a particular thing. Doesn't have to be a large website. In fact, that Pepsi website probably doesn't have a lot of stuff on it. And there's different ways to approach it. Like one thing, and the Pepsi site did this, is they kind of had a landing page. And that's kind of a technique that isn't really encouraged for a lot of websites, but if you're selling something, it can totally work. But if you're doing like a search engine, you don't want to have to go to a landing page and then go to what you're doing. And there's a lot of different ways to pull people in. So one possible way is maybe to have something, very tangible that people will click on. That is going into the recording, She's laughing at the puppy monkey baby, and the product was Mountain Dew. But you still remembered it, right?
Oh, they got another one out too that I'm watching.
All right, I'm going to stay on task here because I want to finish these slides. There's lots of different ways to pull people in, and you probably have seen some of these things, right? So if you go to the website, right, please, thank you. Like, for example, have you guys ever gone, here's another example, tangible one. My wife will shop at like Michael's and Joann's from time to time, right? And whenever you go there, they always have coupons, right? So one thing we do is we'll be in the store and we'll pull up our phone and see if there's a coupon. So we always find a coupon, right? So that's kind of one of those things. But they both very often do a very particular type of thing to do whatever they can to get people to that website, to get people in the store, to get people buying their stuff. That's like the main thing. Now, there's other types of approaches for websites. Here's one. A site where you can actually get information. So we have, for example, Blackboard. Blackboard would kind of fit into this category for you guys because there's stuff that you can do there, right? You can be a discussion board, but more importantly, that's where your assignments are listed, right? Different aesthetic altogether, different approach to building the site. Some of the things you want to consider doing if you're doing that sort of a thing. Sites like this tend to have controlled points of entry, not necessarily though, but tend to. Very last one of the types of sites are task-based applications. Now, we say application as if we're building like a standalone piece of software, but what about situations where you're running a website that really is an application, and what would be an example of one? What would be an example of a website built around a task? Yeah. Okay. You're thinking globally. How about like Gmail? Right? So you're there to do email, right? So the design for the site is really based upon that functionality, upon certain expectations of the user to be able to find things and to be able to do certain types of activities. That is completely a different type of approach to building a website. A lot of us just think, and I see that Steph has the Pepsi site up on her screen and she's kind of scrolling through. I mean, there's not a lot going on there, right? It's just a lot of imagery. Nice photographs, good colors.
The main site is really good though, because it has all of their, like they're trying to connect with the user on every forum, on every platform.
Yeah, they're really tying into social media.
And the transitions they have on there.
Now, I threw some other stuff up here, but social networking working is a really big thing. Why is it a really big thing?
Social networking?
Yeah.
Engagement is huge.
Engagement is huge. So why would Pepsi on their website have like a Facebook logo? Isn't that promoting somebody else's thing?
Yeah.
Feedback?
Contests, things like
Do you know what the most effective kind of advertising is?
word of mouth.
Word of mouth. What's the modern equivalent?
Through Facebook, people talk about what they like, they don't.
Social networking is the modern equivalent.
But the company I worked for, they had people that their job was to monitor that, and that's where they saw an unhappy customer. They put a ticket in for them to contact them.
Restaurant industry's huge with that.
Yeah.
So anything negative on it, you have to take care of it.
So why bother with social media in a nutshell?
Reputation.
It works. That's exactly the answer. People wouldn't do it if it didn't work.
And it's quick.
You'll never find a phone.
And what's the cost of social media?
Could be.
Facebook, I mean, in a way, it's
You pay
free
someone to want to watch.
until you start hiring people to do it, and but for all intents and purposes, it's free,
You don't have to make.
and it draws traffic. Traffic brings business. Business
But if it's not
brings
monitored,
profits.
sometimes
It goes into your pocket. So
you don't want that.
another big thing for us is mobile. And these are some pretty important questions. The trend these days is to build one site that works on all devices. That wasn't always the case. You can still, in fact, in some circumstances, drive people to a website that looks good on a phone, but very often, and I think of my bank as an example, right? I don't want to load their app, but every time I go to their website, it says you should consider downloading our app, right? So that would be a reason to do something separate. There's different approaches. You guys have played with some of these things, flex boxes and images that scale. Media queries really is probably the best approach to use. It can be kind of complicated depending on how you're doing it. If you're doing it manually, you got to figure all this stuff out yourself. If you're using somebody else's framework, it can get you like 90% of the way there, but you still work to do. Right? You guys know what mobile devices look like. Phones, tablets, desktop, 3 different versions, same website. Do you make a website or do you make an app? And if you make an app, will people actually download it and use it? That's the thing, right? You could spend a bunch of money to get an app out there, and nobody uses it. So you have to have some sort of a reason for a person to use the app to make it worth their while to want to use it. So for me, it doesn't make sense, for example, my banking site, to download the app when I can still check my balance through the browser. It doesn't make any sense to me to have the app on my phone.
As a developer, how do you figure out like what costs are associated with that? Like if you created an app and you put it out there.
There's a lot of, well, there's the salary of the developer, right?
I mean, like us, if we're developing an app, I'm not making money on it. I'm just putting it out there because I need to try to do that, right? How do I find out what costs are associated with that for me?
Okay, so that's a valid point, right? So if my bank has an app, they must think that there's value added, right? I mean, that's kind of where you're going. So Starbucks has an app. You guys, anybody use the Starbucks app?
I used to. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get like free stuff. That's why people.
You get free stuff. Not only that, but you can like before you pull into the drive-thru, your drink is ordered. And it's all paid for. You just walk up, you show them your phone, they scan it, boom, you're all done. Here's your coffee. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. So in that case, that boosts their business because, boy, I would go to that competing coffee shop, but Starbucks makes it so easy for me. I got that Frappuccino mocha latte, whatever. No whip, extra syrup, whatever. All right. We all know the importance of mobile at this point. I've told you over and over again that it has become the prevalent form of surfing by far. Search engines recognize it. Website designers recognize it. Now you guys need to start getting yourselves into that game real heavily. In terms of when you're building stuff, you need to consider all that stuff. Lots of different roles you can play in UX design. I'm not going to read through all these, but some of them are information architects. What kind of website would somebody like that work on? Probably a content-driven site. Like people that run Blackboard probably have people that do exactly that. You will get people that take the roles of interaction designers, people that get information on users, might be through research. That's an important step. Some other stuff that may fall into that category. And you might have people that come in on a team and work in all of these different roles. Are you guys noticing a role for like coder? Well, the information architect maybe a little bit. Well, front-end developer, but there's also back-end developers. But, the people at Pepsi are certainly going to have their brand strategists, their business analysts, their content. They're going to have all these kind of people sticking their nose in the project. You guys don't really have that right now, do you? You have a client.
Yeah, right.
Well, we talk about that too, right? But you still have a contract. Yep, and that's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. The bigger the company.
You gotta have your logo correct on your point. What's your trademark?
All right, we were talking about culture a little bit, but whenever you step into an organization before you decide to take that job, you need to do a little research about the company that you're about to work for. Internally, there's a bunch of questions here. You can kind of read through them and ask them or answer them yourselves. But what works, what doesn't? Are all the people that are working on your team people that are worth working with? Think if somebody's not a good team player that they're going to be working on a team? Unless they're like a really super ultra brilliant person that can only do the particular task, chances are no. I don't care how great you are at coding. Still got to deal with people. more questions? All right. Last little portion, and this chapter 16 does not exist in your book physically. I think it's one of the web chapters, but I throw it in because basically it is a chapter that's about meetings, and I think you need to know that at the front end of the whole thing, not the back end of the whole thing. So the daily team reports that we're going to do are not going to be formal meetings. In other words, you don't have to type anything up, you don't have to present a report, you don't have to give a PowerPoint or anything like that. It's just conversation. But you might have meetings in an organization that are very formal. And you need to have ways to kind of deal with all of that. So you go to a meeting, do you know what the meeting's about? Now, we get meetings like in education all the time. It's like, oh, we have a curriculum meeting. Oh, we have our web developer meeting. Oh, and every one of them has some sort of an objective. And the ones that are more formal will have typically an agenda, right? Here's the things we're talking about. Here's the time frames. Here's the topics. This is when we're going to take a break. All those types of things. So that would fall into this category. All the where, when, how, who, what. And then how do you arrange your meetings? Here at Gateway, everything's done on Google Calendar. When there's a meeting I have to attend, it just shows up on my calendar. Right? Have you guys ever gone to any meetings where there's a board and you vote on stuff? Who wants to carry the motion? How many yeas and nays do we have? Anybody abstain? And you ever hear any of that kind of talk? Do you know where that stems from?
Parliamentary procedure.
Parliamentary procedures and Robert's Rules of Order. There's a book about it, about the technique you should use to do these things. Building agendas is one of them. There's a couple of tools I want to show you guys, and we'll do it after lunch, that might help with the way your team works. Whatever collaboration mechanism you guys might employ, you have to employ something. You guys have the benefit here where you get to meet face to face. I'm going to show you a tool or a couple tools that my onliners have to use. Because they have to have their regular meetings, they have to interface with the client, they have to have like stuff they're going to talk about and when they're going to talk about it and who's going to be there and who's responsible, and are you taking minutes, are you keeping record of it? You should be doing those things if it's a formal meeting. Chances are, even if it's an informal meeting, should have somebody taking some notes. So after you have your meetings, usually you'll have like a list of things you have to do or problems you have to solve. And you got to do it. Ultimately, meeting should have some sort of a purpose. The reason I do the daily team reports is I want to know where you guys are at, and by me knowing your progress or your status, you end up knowing your progress and your status. Get everything all done? You guys are in the SDLC? You guys remember the SDLC? Yeah, the Systems Development Lifecycle. Obviously, we'll need to talk about it a little bit, but it starts with understanding the problem, designing a solution, building it, implementing it, testing it, maintaining it, documenting it, and then when you're all done, you probably have a different set of problems to solve, and you're right back to it again. And websites are very much that way. When your project's done, now what? Well, now we start looking at the redesign, or moving on to a different project, or gathering information about how well it works. So that's it for this chapter. Take a break for lunch.